Yesterday, Deadlock released a new patch with 6 experimental heroes that you can play in the Hero Labs. Today, we're going to talk about the biggest winners and the biggest losers from this patch, starting with Grey Talon. I believe Grey Talon to be the biggest winner of this patch, despite only having 4 lines in the patch notes. The first change to Grey Talon is his base regen was increased from 2 to 2.5. On top of that, his spirit scaling from his gun was increased from 0.1 to 0.13. This makes it so when you buy spirit, you do a lot more damage. For example, here with Boundless and being level 1, my arrows do 105 on headshot, 103, 104. His movement speed now scales with spirit again, which is a huge deal because you can get insanely fast if you just have a ton of spirit. For example, here, if I just buy a bunch of spirit items, as well as getting, simply enduring speed, I'm already at 17 meters per second, just zooming around the map. So you can be Formula 1 race car once again. On top of that, his strafe speed in the air when he's using stamina was increased. This means that you can actually cover a lot of distance in the air, particularly if you have superior stamina. And I put no cooldown and fast stamina. You'll be able to see that I can just fly incredibly fast, especially with superior stamina, because you get a lot more air dash distance. With all of these changes, I do believe that we'll be in a bit of a Grey Talon meta, especially at a lower MMR. At higher ranks, I think Grey Talon still has clear weaknesses. He's still pretty squishy, pretty easy to jump on, etc. But I believe that at lower ranks, he's going to be an absolute menace. And at higher ranks, he'll be viable still, and he'll probably still be quite good. Now, if you are against Grey Talon and he is dominating your games, here are a few items you'll want to consider. First thing is, to knock him out of the sky, make sure you're buying Knockdown, as that's going to be very good. You'll also want to consider improved spirit armor, as he does a lot of spirit damage, particularly with the builds people have been going, because the spirit scaling is very good. And finally, the last item that I recommend against Grey Talon is slowing Hex to prevent him from going in the air and escaping. If you catch him on the ground with slowing Hex, it will slow him tremendously. However, if he has a ton of movement speed already, it probably won't be enough. These are just quick tips against Grey Talon, and I decided to include them in these videos now. Let me know if you like it. Next up, we've got another sniper, Vindicta. Vindicta has also received a decent amount of changes. Some of them are buffs, some of them are just overall changes. First of all, the gun cycle time was improved. I believe that this gives her slightly more DPS. Usually they say DPS unchanged, but they didn't say DPS unchanged. So I do believe she gets more DPS. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The bullet damage growth per wound was increased as well. What this means is that when she's max level, she gets a little bit more left click DPS as well. Her fire rate now scales with spirit power, which means that now, if she just gets, let's say, Boundless Spirit, she already shoots like fairly fast, even without having any weapon items. Assassinate no longer splits souls to allies. I would say that this is both a buff and a bit of a nerf at times, because if you stack a lot of souls on one character, if that one character dies, you're going to be giving a lot of souls to the enemy, just because of the way that comeback mechanics work. When you kill a hero that has more net worth than their teammates, you do get more souls in return. So a bit of a change, but a buff to the more selfish Vindicta playstyle for sure. Flight duration, base flight duration was increased by 4 seconds, from 8 seconds to 12 seconds, which is a huge deal. And then the tier 2 upgrade for flight duration was also increased from 6 seconds to 8 seconds, which is also a big deal. So before, if you had both upgrades, you'd have 8 seconds plus 6 seconds, so you'd have a total of 14, and now you have a total of 20 seconds of flight. The bullet radius for Assassinate was increased from 3 inches to 4 inches. This is going to make it slightly easier to hit targets when you're not quite on target, but close enough. For example, as you can see here, I'm clearly missing, but I'm still hitting the target due to the bullet size. And now you can now zoom in with Vindicta. I don't know if this is a buff. This is kind of a change. I personally probably won't be using the zoom in ever, but let me know if you guys use it. Overall, Vindicta is definitely stronger. She still has all the weaknesses of a sniper, and she is also very weak to Grey Talon. Grey Talon has notoriously been a Vindicta counter for a long time. So if Grey Talon is very meta, on the other hand, Vindicta might struggle, but I think she's much stronger than she was before. Paradox, for some reason, is another one of the winners of this patch. I don't really know why, because Paradox at a very high level was, pretty much first pick, first ban in a lot of tournaments, and even in ranked play at, in Eternus games, Paradox is incredibly strong. But they felt that they wanted to buffer. I do believe that the reason they did this is because they want the grenade to be slightly more viable. Paradox was pretty much just played for these 3 abilities, the wall, the carbine, and the swap, and the grenade was more of an afterthought. So they want to buff this grenade so that you can have more build paths on Paradox. However, they buffed the grenade, without nerfing anything else about her kit. So now she's just straight up better overall. I'm going to put the changes on the screen, but basically pulse grenades are now expressed as duration. This is a big deal because now you can buy extended duration and just have like insane duration on your grenades. So if you max it and you have extended duration, you'll be able to see, but it'll last for a very long time. You get a lot of pulses. So just max grenade on a target is 800 damage if you hit all the pulses. That's a lot of damage, as well as the overall damage amp. It gives you damage amp per stack. So you get a ton of damage if you get all the stacks. If we can count, I'm hitting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got 7 times 6% damage amp, which is 42% damage amp, which is more damage amp than Pocket gets. So if you hit all the pulses, you'll get a lot of damage against that target. Other than that, a bunch of things were buffed, just slight buffs. Kinetic Carbine now deals more damage with headshots as opposed to body shots. As you can see, 68 versus 57. This is a slight buff. It's not going to matter that much, but you know, she definitely didn't read it. And also, other than that, you can't miss against evasive targets. So for example, if Mirage is evading, you get Kinetic Carbine, you can hit them guaranteed. That's not a huge deal, but overall Paradox really did not need buffs in my opinion. But here we are with the grenade build and people going Echo Shard being pretty good. Let's talk about the biggest losers now. So first up on the chopping block, we've got Shiv. A lot of people have been asking me, is Shiv dead? Is melee Shiv dead? How do you play Shiv, etc, etc. Shiv has received a lot of changes. In fact, I'll put it up on the screen, but it's quite a bit of lines. Overall, pretty much everything about him was nerfed. He didn't receive a single buff, which to no one's surprise, and I'm completely glad that they nerfed him to the ground. So overall, a couple things were nerfed. The first thing is the knife collision box was nerfed. It's still pretty big, to be honest. Like, as you can see, I'm very much clearly missing and I'm still hitting the knife, but it was nerfed a little bit, so the knives will be slightly harder to hit. The bloodletting cooldown was absolutely gutted. Before it was a 21-second base cooldown, now it's 50 seconds, so it's more than doubled. This is a pretty big deal to how tanky Shiv can feel, because before he could use bloodletting multiple times in a fight, and now he can pretty much only activate it once to clear damage. The bloodletting tier 2 upgrade was increased a lot to give you kind of a better chance, but now when you get the tier 2, it's still higher cooldown than it was before without any upgrades. So overall, still a nerf. One thing that is actually kind of a buff is that bloodletting base duration is 13 seconds instead of 10 seconds. This means that at base level, bloodletting is actually slightly better than it was before in terms of duration. Before, you had to get 1 point in it to get more duration. However, bloodletting base is now only 22% damage deferred as opposed to the 30% it used to be, and now you have to put 1 point in it to get the 30%. This is an extremely valuable point in my opinion, and I think that most Shiv builds should be putting at least 1 point in this fairly early. Now, they nerfed the ultimate quite a bit. The killing blow range is now only 13 meters, so you need to be quite close. Before, I could say that you could be about here and execute them. Now you need to be much closer, around here. So definitely a significant nerf. On top of that, the rage buildup was nerfed a lot from heavy melees. This hurts melee Shiv because he used to get a ton of rage from heavy melees, even on troopers or neutral creeps. Now it's much harder to build up your rage. It's not so bad on heroes. As you can see, if you still hit heavy melees on heroes, you still get a lot of rage. But if you do it on creeps, it's pretty bad. And the final change is rage buildup against creeps was reduced by 50%. This is very, very, very noticeable, and this is a huge nerf to Shiv's farming potential. Before, it was quite easy to go and farm certain camps with Shiv, for example. You can farm the ancient camps, but now, as you can see, if you look at my rage bar here, it's like barely moving, even though I just did 200 damage to this. I go and heavy melee it. It probably takes like 20 heavy melees to get against creeps to get to max rage. So it's just, you're not going to get to max rage shooting creeps pretty much at all. You need to shoot heroes to build up your rage, which I think is a good change, but it's definitely a huge nerf to Shiv's farming potential and makes it a lot more important to kind of keep your rage up all the time. And now your rage starts going down after only 9 seconds, meaning that you need to shoot a target every 9 seconds to stay full rage. Overall, I think Shiv is probably still going to be okay, at the very least good, especially in lower ranks where people don't really know how to deal with him. I think his kit is still insanely strong, and I think Gun Shiv might be back on the menu. I'm not sure about Melee Shiv. I think it's still going to be inherently strong just because of the damage amp and like the fact that your hero is very tanky. It's definitely not nearly as broken as it was before, but it's still very playable, and I believe that you don't need to make any changes to my melee build for it to be good. It's just going to be a slightly different playstyle, and it's going to be a little bit harder to farm. Another loser of the patch is Lady Geist. Now, Lady Geist didn't get nerfed to the ground or anything. She actually didn't get changed that much, but she did get changed a little bit. So her Malice base Malice is only 8% damage amp. So now you need to put 2 points in Malice in order to get 15% damage amp, which is a big deal because a lot of people were maxing the bomb first. So I believe that this is a big deal in the laning stage. Instead of having to play against a 15% damage amp on a 3-second cooldown or 6-second cooldown or whatever, now you have to play against 8% damage amp, which is much more doable in lane for most characters. Don't get me wrong, she's still very oppressive in lane, but definitely a good nerf on that front. As far as Malice goes, the slow duration was also nerfed. So it was nerfed from, I believe, let me check, it was nerfed from 20% to 15%. And the other thing is the debuff duration was nerfed from 13 seconds to 9 seconds. So now you can't just like, it's much harder to keep a bunch of Malice stacks on people, especially in the laning stage when your cooldown's a little bit longer and people aren't peeking all the time. So overall, just good changes to Geist. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So they only touched Malice. The other indirect change is now that Mystic Reverb only applies the slow on the primary target. So it doesn't slow in the AoE anymore. So this actually kind of kills the Mystic Reverb Malice build, in my opinion, because it was so good because it would just debuff a bunch of people in an AoE. Now it only slows that one person. So it's probably significantly worse as well, which is another nerf to Geist. She's still very strong, so I said biggest loser, but she's not the biggest loser of the patch. That's definitely Shiv, but she's definitely one of the losers. I think she's still going to be incredibly powerful, so don't mistake this as me saying that she's weak. It's just that she definitely got nerfed across the board. There are a bunch of other hero changes, and we'll see how the meta develops. I just wanted to put this video out there because I think it's important to just talk about the biggest changes for now. But there are a lot of other changes to other heroes that are impactful, and we'll see how the meta develops. Keep an eye out for my meta report video, which should be coming out in a couple of days. I just got to play this weekend, play a bunch of games, see how the meta develops, and then we'll see what happens. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.